Welcome to Inside the Issues, Education Solutions for Arizona. I'm Olivia Fierro.
And I'm Steve Goldstein. We're bringing together experts, community leaders, and you for a statewide conversation about education and the solutions to move Arizona forward.
This town hall is airing across Arizona on TV, radio, online, and with local newspapers. We're building this event because education affects all of us, our economy, our communities, and our future.
Research shows better education is a top priority for Arizonans. You're about to hear what's working, what data shows needs improvement, and where we can go from here in a neutral, solutions-focused conversation.
We'll look at the whole picture from early childhood and K through 12 to higher ed, trade schools, and the changing workforce. And we really hope that what we cover sparks conversation at your own kitchen table.
Now, we couldn't do this without our partners, including the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission. So who better off to kick off our time here than the Commission's Director, Tom Collins.
So good to see you. Thank you for this.
Thanks, Steve and Olivia. You know, there's no doubt that this is going to be a lively discussion about education in our state. Clean Elections is mandated by the voters to promote participation in the political process, and that's why we're proud to partner with local media to increase voter access to today's discussion. An important step in voting is understanding the impact of the issues in our state and the issues that voters care about. So it's an honor to help you start this conversation that we hope creates awareness and leads to new ideas, and most importantly, gives voters confidence when it comes time to fill out their ballot. So let's get started.
Early childhood education is the launchpad for lifelong learning. These are the years from birth through the age of 5 when the brain is evolving at its fastest pace and children form the skills for everything that follows in life. So here's a little math to consider. There are currently about 171,000 kids in Arizona who are of preschool age. Data from the Center for the Future of Arizona tells us that only about a third of our 3- and 4-year-olds are enrolled in an early learning program. Only 1 out of 3. That's notably below other states across the country. So why is this important, and what solutions can help to support early childhood education, such a critical issue? So let's welcome our panelists today. We have Eve Del Real from Head Start, and we have Dr. Chantel Meek from the Children's Equity Project, Barbie Prinster from Arizona Early Childhood Education Association, and Angela Rabago from First Things First. So I get to easily say, ladies, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. I'm very excited to dig into our conversation. Chantel, I want to start just with you and talking about some of the research that you've been able to do so you can kind of set a foundation for this discussion. For those of us who are not working in this field, who don't realize how critically important this time period in children's lives are, how many of our kids are not getting the preparation that they need before they're hitting kindergarten?
Too many. So to reiterate some of what you said, right, we have decades of research that find that access to high quality early education is associated with a whole range of outcomes, education outcomes, health outcomes, employment, earning, and so on and so forth. But those wonderful outcomes depend on 2 things: access to high quality, access and quality, basically, right? And in Arizona, we know we're lacking in both of those places, right? We see that we're pretty low on the state rankings in terms of access to high quality early education. And we also have some work to do with respect to improving the quality of care, because you can't get those amazing outcomes when we don't have that. And so there's a whole number of issues related to that, right? A lot of the funding that we see in early education is primarily federally funded, right? The state doesn't invest as much as other states across the country, certainly in high quality early education. And so that leaves us with major gaps in access and quality that are most kind of impactful for our lowest income children and children from other historically marginalized communities.
So there's certainly a need, and we've got a lot of room for improvement. That's one way to spin our conversation in a positive way, because we're looking for ways that those of us at home, no matter what representation we have, whether we're watching this as a parent or as an educator, somebody who's interested in getting into education, or maybe as somebody who is a decision maker in an organization, we're going to share some of the ideas of what they need to hear. So let me bring in Eve from Head Start to talk about your presence across the state of Arizona and what you have learned over the years. Arizona voters created this program, obviously realizing that we needed to have access to early childhood education. As the program has evolved here in the state, what lessons have we learned? What direction do we need to go?
Yeah, well, I want to start by celebrating that Head Start in general is celebrating 60 years of service nationally. Here in the state of Arizona, we serve 17,000 children. And for those of you who don't know, Head Start provides high quality early education and family services for those most vulnerable in the state of Arizona. The services that we provide are comprehensive, which means that not only do we provide high quality early education, but we have social services that are integrated, mental health, wellness, nutrition services. When you put all of that together, it creates this amazing environment for children and families to thrive in this option. And what we've seen is that, and historically, and I know Chantal can speak to that too, there's tons of evidence that demonstrates that children and families that participate and Head Start programs have way higher outcomes. We know that children have higher rates of high school graduation, higher educational attainment. Our families are also able to sustain themselves, and there's lower reliance on social service programs as they're going through the program. But I think that even the opportunity for a family to participate and just dream big of what they could do with their family during a time when they are experiencing some severe adversity, the program is there to serve.
Significant numbers, but I imagine there are many more students who would benefit from access.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
We'll continue our conversation here with Barbie. Barbie, you just got home from an important trip, so tell us a little bit about your advocacy and what you were wanting our elected representatives to know about the state of education and early childhood education and development here.
Yeah, I just got back from Washington, D.C. yesterday. I had 9 congressional visits on Thursday. It was a big day. But we talked with both Democrats and Republicans on the issue of early childhood education and funding. And it is agreed on both sides of the aisle. This is really important. It's really important for families to have access to affordable, high quality early education. And the big kicker right now is this is really important for the economy and for the workforce, especially in Arizona. We're bringing in so many companies, worldwide companies to Arizona, and these families have to have access to high quality education.
Let me bring in Angela now from First Things First. And where do you see your programs? And I know that, explain also what First Things First funds, and you're touching on the quality of life for our children and families in a variety of ways, not just in terms of education.
Yes, First Things First is our state's early childhood agency. So we partner with over 80 organizations across the state in all of our communities to fund programs and services for children birth to age 5 and their families. One of the most important pieces of the work that we do is partnering with many of our child care providers across the state, over 1,000, to help them improve the quality of care in their centers and homes. We know that momentum has been growing. We feel like this is a topic that has gained momentum as people begin to understand the impact that those first 5 years have on a child's trajectory in later life, in their school education, and then going on into the workforce. We know, as you mentioned, that brain growth is amazing during these first 5 years. About 90% of brain growth happens in those first 5 years. So it really is a key opportunity to set that foundation for young children so that they can be successful later on. We want all children to climb that ladder of success, but we can't expect them to do that if that lower rung is broken.
It's almost intimidating to think about the importance of those early years. I mean, I know whenever you're a new parent, it's stressful. You want to do your best. Maybe you don't yet know what you're doing, and you think, oh, everything is make or break. But it really is, because this is such a crucial time. So what advice do you have for families at home who might be watching and they're thinking, okay, am I doing enough? How do I do what I can to engage my child at home? And how do I start finding the resources that I need so that I really get on a path towards success? this?
We always share with families that, learning doesn't begin when a child enters the kindergarten classroom. It begins at birth. And it really happens in the everyday moments that families have with children, whether it's with their childcare provider or with their parents and other relatives at home. Those everyday moments of the back and forth interaction, we call it serve and return in our field, where a child is really learning the foundational pieces of language and early literacy development. That's happening just through talking through your day. So when a parent is at home with their young child, talking about, we're going to be pulling the laundry out, and now I'm going to take out the socks, and we're matching these colors, and these are red, and these are blue. Those are all opportunities to really develop a child's brain in positive ways.
That's a very manageable part of adding to your day, and it is so vitally important. Barbie, we recently just heard the news that the state of New Mexico is providing preschool, early childhood education for all students. Tell me what your reaction was to that news. What can Arizona do to get there? Is that where we want to go? Are there other options and solutions?
Well, I think New Mexico is at the forefront of what we all strive to be, providing early childhood for every family, regardless of income, and creating that accessibility for anybody. It also helps, again, the workforce families and be able to get into the workforce. But it requires a lot of funding. It requires a sustainable solution to childcare funding. And that's one of the things that we really have to work on here in Arizona. Like Chantal mentioned, we rely so heavily on the federal funding from the federal government to fund our system. We did have a significant investment this year out of our general fund, but it's not enough. We do have over 7,000 children on a waiting list for low-income working families. So those are families that cannot go to work and are struggling to find alternative care for their children.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is a bigger picture. It's maybe you're watching this and you're like, oh, I don't have a child at home. I don't have this doesn't impact me. It does. It impacts our economy because these are people who need to be out in the workforce, and oftentimes they'll sit and do the math, and it doesn't make sense because you're paying more for your child care than you are in your earnings, and so that's a whole conversation on its own. But what steps should people be taking as they're looking for affordable options, and also to make safe, smart options? I mean, it's a huge burden. It's a big decision of where you're going to place your most precious little one while you're at work.
Exactly. You want to look into high quality. First things first has our signature quality improvement rating system.
Okay.
It's called Quality First. It's based on a 5-star scale. They have tons of information on their website for families to look at, to what you're going to look at as what a high quality center would look like. And homes can participate in this as well. So we know that parents want options, right? So they should be able to place their children, whether it's a Head Start facility or home provider or a licensed child care center, a faith-based provider, a nonprofit, wherever they choose. We want accessibility for that child to be in a high quality environment and for those experiences to happen. One of the things that somebody said during my time in DC is that we are brain builders and job creators, and that couldn't be more true. But for families looking for this option, we really want them to have the resources and accessibility to find all of those things that they need to put their children where they feel comfortable and safe.
Okay. Chantal, I know you have looked very deeply into the numbers of who is unable to access quality early childhood education because of financial constrictions, and also some of the parameters that are set by the state that maybe you think could be realigned to be more in line with some of the federal requirements regarding early childhood settings for children. So tell me a little bit about what you have discovered and what you would be advocating for regarding early childhood, daycare, preschool, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's important to understand why it's so expensive, right? We talk about the cost of childcare a lot, and it doesn't sometimes it doesn't make sense, but here's why it's so expensive, right? So if you have a baby, if you know a baby, if you've worked with a baby, if you've seen one on TV,
We've all
right?
seen a baby.
You know
They're
that
cute, right?
unlike a class full of 5th graders, for example, where one person can, conceivably manage a classroom of 20 kids and make sure they're learning and make sure they're cared for. You can't do that with babies or toddlers or preschoolers, right?
This is your individual work time, baby. So you've got 20
Right,
minutes and then I'll be
exactly.
back.
Like read this book,
Right.
right? You need the adult-child interaction that we just talked about. And so for safety purposes, for learning purposes, for all of that, we need more people. So it's more teachers for fewer kids, right? We need better ratios than what you do in older kids. So that makes it expensive because people and staff, right, are one of the most expensive line items in a business's budget. So there's that piece. And then the second piece of it, right, is the chronic underfunding from the public system that we've seen, especially in this state and in some other states. So when you put those two pieces together, right, it's expensive to operate, especially in a high quality way. And we don't have the public investment that falls on three things, right? Parents and tuition, and we know parents can't afford to pay more. The other piece is kids, right? Kids can't afford to lower the quality and make it cheaper so that they're potentially unsafe or not learning. Can't do that. And we can't put it on providers because early educators are already making really low wages, right? Over half in this country are eligible for public benefits. They make well less than K-12 educators. And so we can ask them to earn less, right? They're already barely making it by. And so when you have this system where parents can't afford to pay more, kids can't afford to have lower quality, providers can't afford to get paid less, you need that public investment when you want a solution at scale, right? Business is important. You know, all of the community is important, but at scale, we need that public investment in order to make those solutions. And so when we think about the kids who don't have access, right, Head Start is an incredible program. It has a really long track record, really amazing outcomes, but here in the state, fewer than 30% of kids have access in poverty, kids in poverty. This is not even all kids. Just of our kids in poverty, right, about 60%, 70% don't have access to Head Start. We know that 16 other states in the nation invest in Head Start, so they build on that federal investment with state dollars to expand access to their kids in poverty. We don't do that. And so that is, right, Head Start is a model we've had. It's a proven track record. It's in every zip code just about in the state. And so that's a really low-hanging fruit way to like invest state dollars, expand access to at least get to our kids living in poverty and then make your way up the income scale.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too, as you're talking about the children that are experiencing poverty, especially with Head Start, when you break it down further, I mean, 10% of the enrollment is dedicated for children with disabilities. We provide individualized support for children with special needs. When we go back and have those discussions about the cost in providing even that individualized level of service, it's specialized, right? And so we're trying to sustain, again, this level of quality that we know is needed at a very crucial time of development. But in addition to that, with the Head Start model, we're also serving families that are experiencing homelessness, children that are in the foster system. All of that requires a unique approach to ensure that this individualized delivery is leading to this phenomenal outcome, that despite the adversity that they may be experiencing, you can still succeed. And I think that's where that cost comes, but we want that for everybody. It's a model that everyone should have an opportunity to engage in.
And I think it can probably be surprising for people to hear what some of our children in our own community go through, right? And the obstacles that they have to overcome to just be nearing an even playing field when they get into their education system later. And so what are some of the impacts that you see long term? I know there's been a lot of research on the impact of Head Start in terms of who these young children will become, whether it's how they're able to stay in school later on or, you know, become contributing members of our society, or what happens when they don't have this access in this early time period?
I mean, because they do have the access, they achieve all those things. And I think that's part of the concern that we collectively have, is that if children do not, or the family have access to this resource, these cycles of poverty or adversity continue. And this is definitely a conduit that can help break that cycle of poverty, but then it can also advance achievement. Because now the child has been exposed, and so has the family, to multiple resources that we know that lead to wellness and stability and socioeconomic self-reliance, because the family has opportunities to connect to workforce development. And what that does generationally, we know is phenomenal. We see that in the research. And I think for us as a collective, the opportunity for the family and the child to both participate in higher educational attainment is one that has huge economic benefit at a state level. Because that civic engagement is now elevated. And we also know that both children and families also have this opportunity to engage at a capacity where they're keeping our community safe. We know that those children are less likely to have issues with law enforcement or within the criminal justice system. So when you put all of those things together, those are elements that save the state money, that we could redirect those resources to continue enhancing what we're already providing, and maybe even through the K through 12. There should be enough for everybody.
Yes.
If I can build on
absolutely.
that, you know, when for many years in the education field, we've talked about an achievement gap, that many children who face challenges, they have lower levels of achievement and on school testing, you know, all of the measures that we use in the K-12 system. But what we found is that achievement gap is actually often a readiness gap, that those children come into kindergarten classroom well behind their peers and they are playing catch up for all those years of education. And oftentimes they are unable to catch up. So like Eve was saying, if we can really invest in those early years, in those first 5 years that are foundational, we will have decreased costs later on. We've seen decreases in the need for special education because those children with developmental delays are identified early on and receive the supports when it is least costly to provide them, which is in the early years. We have higher rates of third grade reading levels, so we see that for children who have developed those foundational vocabulary skills early on. And then high school graduation rates also skyrocket for children who have been in high quality education.
The numbers are there. I mean, we just have to read this map and figure out how to get on it. For those who are able to seek out a child care center, preschool program that they want, give us some insight, Barbie, into what people should be looking for. What have we learned maybe, you know, over the last few decades that make things different? I mean, you just think of them as, oh, just playing. You know, what are we learning is so important. And if you have access to and the option to select a spot for your child, what are you looking for that makes one stand out?
Yeah, I think, you know, years ago we used to just say daycare.
Right.
And we have steadily moved away from that and are evolved into early education or early childhood education. From, you know, taking care of a 6-week-old to a pre-K child, you're looking, like Chantel talked about, ratios. What are the teacher-to-child ratios in the classroom? We have state ratios that our licensing Department of Health Services has. You can do better than that and have lower ratios. Again, it costs more money, so that's a factor that you have to think about. What type of curriculum are they using? The back and forth, the professional development programs, involvement in a quality improvement rating system, the Quality First program that we have. Are you nationally accredited by maybe NACE or NAC? All of those things are requiring you to do a bit more, or sometimes a lot more, than what our basic baseline licensing regulations are that parents can look for, which will really make a difference. That back and forth talking with children, I'm not just saying, hey, the apple is red. We're saying, you know what, there's seeds in this apple. Let's see if we can, plant them. Let's read a book about apples. What nutrients are in apples? So it's extending those conversations along the line. And as a parent, going through and touring and finding the best fit for you. Not every child is made to be in a large, in a center with a large classroom. Maybe they should be in a smaller home provider that's licensed, or maybe it's a family friend and neighbor care, or maybe it's a faith-based program. But what type of setting is going to be the best fit for you and your child?
For those who have raised children, you remember the moments of drop off at the beginning, and there's crying and there's tears. The adults are crying, the kids are crying. It's very stressful, and you're second guessing every decision you've ever made in your life leading up to the point. So once the nerves settle and you get into a routine, what are we looking for in terms of noticeable change with the littles when they're coming home and you can say to yourself, okay, I feel confident with the decision. I feel confident that we're on a track to be ready for kindergarten and that we are safe and happy and doing all right.
Right. A lot of providers provide parent-teacher conferences, for a 2-year-old. I think that's amazing.
Is my child a genius?
yeah.
No, ma'am. Everything other than that is going just great.
Right. They're coming, you're picking them up and they're happy. Sometimes they're even angry. They don't want to go home because they want to be with their friends and their teachers. And having, you're going to know how well your child is, adjusting, and it might take some time, but really they're being loved on, they're being cared for by these incredible providers. They're singing songs that they have. They're giving you some little bit tidbits of things that they've learned in class. There are now software systems out there where parents are getting like daily notices and pictures on their phones through apps of their child participating in an art project or a science project all throughout the day to keep you updated on what's happening. So there's really great things that are happening out in the communities. And just wrapping these families up, I think when we support the family as a whole, those outcomes just become even greater.
I think I'd add to that, or just reiterate some of that. In early childhood especially, this is the case across all kids of all ages, but in early childhood especially, feeling safe and emotionally secure enables you to learn, because that's like a precursor. So you have to feel like you're in a trusting, positive relationship. You have to trust the provider. You have to feel safe in the setting as a child to even want to explore your environment, to even engage in any back and forth interaction that's positive and that builds the brain for learning. So that, I feel like that is really foundational, and it's not something that's just natural, right? We need training for that, especially when you have 4 or 5 kids, right? Not just your own baby, but like a number of kids, where we have to facilitate this safe, emotionally safe, regulated environment where you're building a relationship so the child trusts you, so they know you. So, Barbie said loving on you. That's true. Like they have to feel like they are loved and supported. And then that opens up the door for learning, for exploration. Like, okay, I feel safe. I'm gonna go over here and explore these blocks or explore this book or whatever. But that is a foundational piece, and it doesn't come natural. It requires training and professionals and supports and all of the things that happen behind the scenes.
Right. Eve, I want you to chime in on this as well, because obviously these are the moments where you're building confidence and you're building or forming your feelings in general that will last throughout your education about school.
Yeah.
Is this a place I like to go? Is school, fun for me? Is it safe for me? There are also other issues that will get in the way of someone's learning. I mean, if you think about a child who is hungry, who is not sleeping in the same bed every night or a bed at all, they're tired, there are all of these other factors that can get in the way and ultimately requiring an even more experienced, well-trained educator and caregiver in those moments to identify truly what a child needs.
And I think that's what we all share, this concern that we need a highly qualified workforce. The investments in early childhood are going to support this workforce because, just with Head Start alone, we know that we need a qualified workforce because of the higher needs that some of our children have. All of the things that you just mentioned. And fortunately for Head Start families, SNAP recipients are categorically eligible. We're prepared. But for other providers who don't have the additional funding to do that, then the learning suffers because these providers are trying to manage these other needs. And again, we have to ensure that our workforce is prepared because we just never know what families are going through in general.
So for those programs that are not funded by the state or federal dollars, how do we get there? How do we make sure that these very important nurturers and educators are able to identify and address in the moment?
Well, I think it starts with when we look at how we value our childcare providers and professionals who are working with young children. I think for a long time we have not placed the same amount of value on the work that they're doing. As Barbie said, they are literally building brains every day in the work that they do. While they are feeding infants, while they are changing babies, they are actually doing the work that helps to build those brains. So can we start with valuing the work that they do and appreciating that? I think that we as a community can put some focus there. The other piece is the public investment that really is needed to ensure that they are not leaving this important work for other jobs that pay more. Oftentimes, childcare providers have such a hard time recruiting and retaining workers just because they can go down the street to a retail location, to a restaurant, and make more money, often in less stressful environments. So we have to look at what is our public investment and how are we valuing our children in these early years.
Also, I think investing in professional development for our workforce around childhood trauma and those experiences is really, really important. You know, we don't have masters in social work to, you know, deal with sometimes the behaviors that we're seeing. And again, those behaviors are a result of what's happening in that family. So how do we not only support the child, but offer resources to families as well to help them.
For so many issues, and making sure that they're hitting the benchmarks that they need along the way and getting any interventions that they need. We are going to bring in an audience question now. Right. So I have Mitra standing by. Hello.
Hi, I'm Mitra Kazi. I'm a governing board member with the Madison Elementary School District. And I'm curious, what can we learn from the different early childhood education models across our state that could guide Arizona's approach, especially in terms of preparing our K-12 students?
We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's been a model that was established, what'd you say, 60 years ago?
It's 60.
60, right? That has lots of research behind it, right? And we've been talking a lot on the emphasis on kids with higher needs, right? Kids living in poverty, kids in child welfare, kids experiencing homelessness. But the actual classroom quality indicators of Head Start are applicable to all kids, right? Head Start standards have better ratios than, for example, state licensing standards. Training for the teachers is embedded within the model. There is funding embedded for that. There is funding embedded for screenings, right? And screening, like hearing and vision screening, that's not an income thing, right? That's something that we want for all of our kids. And then the specialization, right? So like identifying and individualizing, right, based on what kids' needs, right, is applicable across. So I would say the Head Start model.
Ladies, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I just really appreciate the work that you do on a daily basis and your insights. So thank you so much to Eve, Chantel, Barbie, and Angela.
Thank you.
K-12 education is the cornerstone of our system. These are the years that shape futures from kindergarten through high school, where students build the knowledge and the confidence to succeed in college, careers, and in life. But our schools face, of course, real challenges: teacher shortages, funding pressures, equity gaps, plus a divide over school choice and access to education savings accounts, or ESAs. Yet Arizonans agree on the core K-12 goals. Data from the Center for the Future of Arizona shows that 89% believe every student deserves an excellent education at this stage of life. 92% say strong teachers and principals are essential. And 79% support increasing funding for our public schools and transparency for dollars that go elsewhere. So how do we make sure every child in Arizona has the opportunity to thrive? Let's welcome our panelists today, and we're going to be able to indulge in their expertise. Very much looking forward to it. So we have Catherine Haley from the Arizona State Board of Education, Steve King from the Yavapai County School District Superintendent, and Steve here, and Jake Logan from the Arizona Charter School Association, along with Carla Phillips Krivickas from Champions for Kids. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm very excited to get our conversation going. I'm going to start, Steve, with you, because you are an educator. You're dealing with this big district. You've got the teachers, the students, the principals, the community. You're balancing a lot of things. So give us a glimpse into the state of public education and what some of the biggest challenges are that you're facing.
Great question. And so I'm the Yavapai County School Superintendent. So my role is a little bit different than a district superintendent. And I was a district superintendent for about 7 years, but it's now I'm the head of an education service agency. And what that is you identify what those needs are, listen, innovate, and serve. So finding what those needs are. But the challenges where I'm from in Yavapai County, anyway, and I don't pretend to know much about anything except Yavapai County and schools and kids, is there's a lot of challenges we have up there, and a lot of great things that are happening too, and I hope I get a chance to talk about that. But you hit upon the teacher shortage, which is a huge challenge that we're seeing, and one of the goals that I have And I think the goal for this entire state should be having a highly qualified teacher, effective teacher in front of every kid in Yavapai County, or across the entire state for that matter. And that's easier said than done. What we're seeing is a lot of teachers leaving the profession and not as many coming in the pipeline. A lot of leaving the state for pay issues. You look at the price of housing, and I know where I'm from in Yavapai County, the average price of a home and a stick-built home in Yavapai County, median price is right around $700,000. And I was the superintendent of a school district, the highest paid person in that school district, and had I not moved to Yavapai County 25 years ago, I would not find a place to live. So how do we expect to recruit teachers to come and live in Yavapai County and teach in our schools? So my two favorite words, as anyone who's worked with me for any amount of time, will be so what, right? We have challenges, but so what? What are you willing to do about it? So a lot of different things, working with the colleges, working with the universities, working with the school districts to grow your own teacher programs, to help facilitate putting those the goal of having a highly qualified teacher in front of every kid. But make no mistake, these are the challenges are deep and they're complex. There are a lot of challenges that we have.
Well, we're going to tackle some of those challenges, hopefully today, and at least have those who are listening and joining us at home some takeaways that can make us feel like we are all able to better this circumstance for the state. So, Catherine, let me bring you in and have you give sort of a rating. You're on the inside, and I imagine dealing with much of what Steve was talking about, that it seems like there are easy solutions when you're not looking at the complexity of all of this. But give us a picture of how many students are in the system and what our resources are, maybe what you would focus on as our biggest challenge and maybe our biggest win.
Great. Thank you so much, Olivia, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with Clean Elections and Arizona Media. I should note that, yes, I serve as president of the State Board of Education, but my views are my own. I'm also the founder and a partner of Oak Rose Group, a strategy consulting firm. But it's a real joy to be here. In our role at the State Board of Education, we have over 1.1 million students in our public education system. About 20-some%, and Jake can correct me if I'm a little off on my statistics, more than 20% are attending charter schools. We also have a rising population, about 5% in our home education, and more than 5%. We actually don't know the exact number of students participating in our private schools. But what's really interesting, since 2011, that was our peak time of student enrollment in our K-12. Due to sort of declining in births, we've seen a decline in student participation in our K-12 schools, but we also, over the last 30 years, we also have a lot of choice and opportunity. We'll probably talk later today about the empowerment scholarship accounts that we have. It's very interesting. Funding for K-12 education has certainly gone up. We used to be quite low when we looked at Arizona nationally amongst the 50 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, but we are moving up. A couple wins that I think we have some great policy on the books. When you look at Move On When Reading, this is our K-3 literacy focus. We are slowly, in 2022, I believe, the state board passed some rules and regulations to really hold our schools of education accountable for the education that our next generation of educators. So by 2026, our educators will have to be schooled in the science of reading. This is phonetics, vocabulary, comprehension, a wide range of things.
Well, and as Catherine's speaking, we're talking about all of our students, so including those who are choosing charter schools, private schools, homeschooling, other programs, and also those who have special needs that are also in all of those same opportunities. So Carla, let me bring you in and have you give us sort of a snapshot of where we are about your organization, what your perspective is, and the resources that are needed and currently available.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me. So I'm a co-founder of Champions for Change, and we are a coalition of parents, attorneys, and advocates, bringing a voice for students with disabilities in all of these forms. So we're really grateful to be able to be here. So contrary to what I think would shock a lot of people, is about 14% of students in Arizona have a disability, meaning it's diagnosed and they have an individualized education plan. It's about 140,000 plus students, so it's a lot of kids. But what I find so interesting is that often the preconceived notions of students with disabilities is that they think of kids like with autism, with Down syndrome, kids with very significant disabilities, but 80% of kids with disabilities have what I call invisible disabilities. So you think ADD, you think dyslexia, you think of speech language impairment, and these kids are in regular classrooms with regular teachers all day. And those are the kids that we find that go undiagnosed, unidentified, and underserved. So when I think of those 12th graders who are not reading, I think, how many have we missed along the way? So I think if my one big takeaway is parents, if you know something, if you're getting that sense, that mommy instinct that something's wrong, don't be afraid to push and ask and evaluate and get the services and supports that you get, because oftentimes parents are told, he's fine, everything's fine, until it's not.
Everyone learns in their own way, in their own rate. In our earlier conversation about early childhood ed, also talking about the importance of that access to an educator who is well trained to be able to help a parent who might not otherwise know, identify, hey, we're not meeting these benchmarks, or something is a little bit, different, that the earlier the better to address and figure out how to make sure that they're learning and that they're feeling positive about going to school, right?
Absolutely. The earlier the identification, the earlier the intervention, the higher rate of success, regardless of the disability.
So Jake, let me bring you in here. We're talking about all of the options that parents, families, students have now, educators as well. I mean, the jobs can maybe feel different. Fundamentally, it is the same, but there are different environments that work better for some, both from a professional perspective and a learning perspective. So tell me about the options that are presented in the state. We always have people moving to Arizona, and they may get here and just be baffled by this system. So break it down for us.
No question. Thank you again for having me. It can be a bit overwhelming when you're a new parent and you're trying to sort out where the right fit might be for your student or your child. So in Maricopa County, about 50% of the families use school choice if you define that as going to a school other than the district school they're assigned to.
Okay.
So that could be as...
what was the percentage?
It's about 50% in Maricopa County, yeah. It could be a different district. That's probably the most popular option is I'm going to go to a different school within my district or in a different district. Could be a charter school in Arizona. As Catherine noted, we have a little over 20% of students in public education are enrolled in a charter school, which as a state is higher than anywhere in the country. And then you have the option of using an ESA and choosing a path that works for an ESA. So it can be overwhelming. My advice is always visit a school.
Yes.
You get a vibe. You can kind of tell if that's the right fit for my student. And where charter schools, I'm obviously a homer for charter schools, but I think a lot of districts have done great work too, is really trying to customize and figure out what is their thing. Is it music? Is it sports? Is it a dual language? Is it STEM? And there's so many good choices in Arizona. We've got a lot of work to do and there are a lot of challenges, but there are some really good schools doing really great things, district and charter schools. And I really feel like it's hard work, but when you sort out and you find that right fit, it's like magic. It's just a great, great thing to see.
And the number of options, I mean, it can be staggering. So what are some questions to be asking as you're looking at this list and deciding, okay, I gotta narrow down a couple of school visits and I wanna really know what my options are as maybe you're entering a new grade or if you're hitting middle school or high school or, at any stage in between?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always tell people if you've seen one charter school, you've seen one charter school.
Right.
They're all different. They all have a different vibe, mission, serve different kinds of students. There's a lot of public information out there. You can go to the Department of Education's website and it will give you information on schools. Like my organization, the Arizona Charter Schools Association, has a website where you can type in your address and it'll show you the schools in that area. But I'll say it again, I really don't think there's any substitute for physically visiting that school. What's the curriculum look like? What's the teacher ratio? What are the specials or the other things that you offer? They're just all so different and it can be overwhelming, but if you kind of narrow in on 2 or 3, and a lot of parents will have something in mind. My student really loves playing the trumpet or the arts, and there's schools that really specialize in that. So it's a little tricky to get through, but once you get through it, I think it usually works out pretty well.
So as you are helping families navigate maybe seeking out a diagnosis, an evaluation, an identification, so that maybe they can get an IEP that is going to allow their child to just be on that even playing field, right? That's what that is about. How do you move that forward and also give yourself options or decisions regarding schools? Does everybody honor an IEP in the same way? What are the logistics or legalities around that?
Well, that was a lot of questions, but I'm going to try and tackle them because they were good ones. Charter schools are public schools, so they provide the same level of resources they're responsible for as all public schools. So I just want to say that at the outset. But there are a lot of choices for kids with disabilities as well, especially in the homeschool arena, especially with ESAs now. We don't talk about it a lot, but 16,000 of the students who are using an ESA have a disability. So that's a lot. I would always encourage parents. I think the thing that we hear the most is they don't want that label. So it's really a lot of parents who don't want that label. They're afraid they won't be able to get into a certain school or get into college. And I just had one of my partners say something to me the other day that made me laugh. She's like, you don't want to label your kid, but the world already has. If your child is struggling, whether it's to pay attention, whether it's to see, whatever it is, it's already happening. So we really encourage parents to seek out that evaluation and get those resources that come with it, because unfortunately that's how those are unlocked.
So Catherine, what was your takeaway of the most recent test scores and what is going to be implemented as we are trying to make even incremental improvements?
Gosh, those are big questions. I would say looking at the recent NAEP scores for 12th grade reading and math and sort of the dip. When you look at Arizona scores, we had really sort of crescendoed up to 2019. When you look at our 4th grade reading, just after the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, around 2022, we held strong. We didn't really see much change, unlike much of the other parts of the country. And then we've sort of seen a more dramatic dip. What I would say is it's getting back to the basics. I think Carla said it really well of how many students have been sort of passed along and within our existing system that have not had the specific instruction or the support or educators or other members of the education team to come alongside to help ensure that that child has the foundation that he or she needs to thrive. Couple things. One, I think the fact that Move On When Reading is a policy we've had on the books for over 10 years. I think it was
so 3rd grade?
This is sort of the 3rd grade reading,
Okay.
that in theory, like if you are not proficient at reading, you're supposed to be held back.
Don't go on to 4th grade because you're never going to catch up, basically,
right. The idea is that foundation, that unique time is really setting the foundation, not I'm just reading, but I'm reading to learn. I'm reading to understand. I'm reading to help apply not only just concepts that I'm learning in the different subjects, but also applied in math. When I look at the recent results, it's one, the pandemic had a tremendous impact on our kids, but that also means that kids might not have had the foundation that they needed prior to the pandemic. I commend Read On Arizona and the strategic partners with ADE, our foundations and other agencies across the state. They are really focused that by 2030, that I think it's about 75% at a minimum of our kids will be reading proficient by grade 3.
Okay. And we know that the trickle down effect, of course, we see definitely with how many Arizonans are graduating from high school, how many are staying in. What do you see about the retention rates and also, what can be done? Where are the issues happening? Because we're losing quite a few kids.
Yeah, it's kind of been a phenomena post-COVID where there's just a lot of kids that never came back.
And absenteeism, chronic.
Yeah, absenteeism is a real challenge. And my hat's off to a lot of educators because they will literally go and knock on the door and say, hey, you weren't in school today. Come on, let's go, and calling. And I feel like there has been an increased emphasis since COVID from school leaders on how do we make sure those kids are in school and showing up. And it's hard work. It is challenging. People have a lot of difficult things in their lives that they're working through at times, but trying to make sure that student is in class and learning and in a position to learn. I'm blown away by some of our educators and the extra mile they go to make sure those kids are in school. And it's hard. It's hard work.
We know that not everybody has a parent at home who is going to be invested in student success and understanding the value of being bottom in the chair, ready to learn on a daily basis. But for those parents who are very invested, do understand that this is the open door. I'm a first generation college graduate. I mean, the priority was there all along. If you're coming from this perspective, at what stage do you step in when you see some struggle? And at what stage is it best to be hands off? I imagine, schools are very challenging because there are some parents who are probably there all the time and really don't need to be and need to let people do their thing. So maybe from the two of you.
Well, I think it definitely depends per child.
Yes.
If you have children, you know they're very different. I've probably been accused of being a helicopter mom, so I have that perspective. I think right away. It's part of just going with that your instincts. I think parents know right away when something is off. And they may be seeing things at home that aren't being seen at school or vice versa. So I say, do not be afraid. Even the best performing schools, kids can struggle. And it's nobody's fault, but kids are struggling. So you have to step up right away and say, I think something's going on. That's why we call ourselves champions for kids, because we believe every child deserves a champion.
So maybe you should give the advice of how to bring an issue to the table while still being supportive of your educators and, you know.
And I think the first thing with anything is you got to admit you have an issue, right? And once that admission happens, and that doesn't always happen. You look at chronic absenteeism, for example. It's kind of a hidden, because there's a small percentage of kids that are creating a lot of absences. When the state measures absenteeism, they say, oh, you got a 7% absenteeism.
That's a hard chart to decipher,
Right?
by the way.
Exactly.
I want to make a complaint about that one.
But if you dig into a little bit deeper, the 20% of these kids are creating almost all those absences. And so in targeting them, but actually holding them to a standard, because what happens, and this is a very real thing that we see, is that young kids, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, we're seeing upwards 50, 60, 70 absences a year. That's devastating for their education. Not only for their education, but think about all the additional resources you have to put into educating that child that's taking away from every other kid. And oftentimes, if a kid doesn't know what's going on in school, what's he going to do or she going to do? They're going to act out. And that creates challenges, learning challenges for everyone.
We have an audience question for you today. So let me bring in Janelle. Hi, Janelle.
Hello. My name is Reverend Janelle Wood, and I am with Black Mothers Forum, and I appreciate the conversation. My question for you all is, how are schools partnering with families and respective communities to create safe and supportive learning environments beyond academics?
I guess I want to share the concern. If you have a child, especially with a significant disability, safety is paramount. That is the first thing you're looking for. And I will double down on what Jake said, touring and visiting, is it? Because unfortunately, it's all about the school culture. And something that you can't really measure, and it's something really hard to replicate. It's great leadership, but it's also something you know and you feel when you tour school. But if kids are not feeling safe and supportive, a lot of learning is not going to happen. Huge fan of extracurricular opportunities. I think helps with absenteeism, but also making sure that all those opportunities are accessible, inclusive of all kids. So I want to definitely echo that concern, because that's really what it comes down to. So thank you for raising that.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, Carla, thank you. Jake, thank you. And Steve and Catherine, we appreciate your insights so much. And you can take it back to the green room and continue your conversation, because I know that there's a lot more to say. So we really appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Post-secondary education, whether university, community college, or technical training, is increasingly part of the conversation about what is needed for career success. But today, fewer than half of Arizona high school graduates enroll in any form of post-secondary education, and even fewer complete their degrees or credentials. The good news? Arizonans see solutions. Data from the Center for the Future of Arizona shows 87% support reducing financial barriers to college of all types, 93% support giving students access to dual enrollment or early college credit while still in high school. Arizonans also agree our public universities, community colleges, and career training programs are essential. So let's welcome our panelists to talk about access to this type of education. Susan Bitter-Smith from the Maricopa County Community College District. Jaden Fisher, Student Regent on the Arizona Board of Regents. Meryl Kemp-Wilcox from Pima JTED, and Rich Nickel from Education Forward Arizona. Thank you all for being here so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich, let's start off with a brief background on Education Forward Arizona, what the organization's mission is. And I want to go back to that statistic that I mentioned as we were starting. Center for the Future of Arizona shows fewer than half of high school graduates enroll in a post-secondary program. It seems like an incredibly low number. How did we get there, and how do we somehow try to fix that?
Super complicated question. Education Forward Arizona is a statewide 501c3 nonprofit. We really focus on advocating for and also helping create and model programs that increase our attainment rate in the state because we know that's good for Arizona's economy and Arizona as a whole. When we talk about that, what is now 47% rate, it's simply unsustainable from a business perspective especially. And that's gone down a full 6 percentage points since before COVID. So has something to do with it. But if you look at the ecosystem we're in, number one, post-secondary, to a lot of people, the perception of affordability is a big issue. So we did a poll a couple of years ago and asked people that had gone to college but hadn't, or any type of post-secondary, when we talk about that, gone, not completed, or those who just decided not to go. And we said, okay, what was the barrier here? And a lot of things we see on the political signs ended up not being the barrier in their mind, right? So I didn't think I'd fit in there. I had, didn't want to go because of some gender issues. Those type of things didn't poll. Here's what polled. It cost a lot. And all the costs associated with the cost were also keeping people as a barrier. So we're working on affordability here in the state, I think, in post-secondary. The Arizona Promise program this year, the community colleges also have a Promise program that was legislated. But there's also other things happening in the preparation stage of that I think people are starting to look at, like more counselors, more dual enrollment, things of that nature. Until we get some of that solved and some investment and some of those things that help, we're going to remain, I think, in this situation where we're below 50%, unfortunately.
And no shock, we'll talk about affordability a little bit later on the panel. Susan, you're a member of the Maricopa County Community College District Board. Give us a quick explanation. I think people know how massive it is, but it's the biggest one in the country by enrollment.
We are the largest community college district in the country. 10 individual campuses. We service about 140,000 students in a given time, and a variety of products, and which is I think one of the ongoing solutions potentially to this, because we certainly are a more affordable opportunity for post-secondary education. We offer the traditional associate degrees. We have now fast-track certification programs that place you right into employment. We have a lot of special programs that have been funded for very specific industries with corporate participation. And we now actually can offer bachelor's degrees. We have 11 accredited bachelor's degrees program, ranging from education to AI, to nursing, to business administration. Those programs will provide the equivalent of a 4-year degree, but for a much less expensive cost.
Well, I'll stick with you for a more specific question about that. So how do community colleges work with universities, or is there competitiveness? Is there a way of having more collaboration there to fix some of the problems we're going to be talking about?
We certainly have a collaborative relationship with the 3 public institutions and with some of our private 4-year partners as well. And I think it's very cordial. We worked our way through the 4-year degree bachelor's program issue, and we have that resolved. So anyone who walks out the door with an associate's degree is automatically accepted to any of the Arizona universities. We have an ongoing relationship with them in terms of making sure that everything gets transferred. There is a collaboration with admissions teams in our district as well as the state institutions. Could it be better? Of course. Can we do a better job of informing people that it's that simple to do? Absolutely. So I think there's where some of our challenges are.
Meryl, let me turn to you. Let's talk about PIMA JTED. Explain to people what JTED even stands for to start with.
PIMA JTED stands for the Joint Technical Education District. We are a type of entity called a CTED, Career and Technical Education District. What that means is that our space we are a public district that only works with career and tech ed. Things that people used to call vocational training or shop class has evolved into a really robust and sort of high-end training program, really sophisticated training program to help equip students in industries relevant to Arizona, sort of across the spectrum.
Have the programs gotten better in terms of really meeting the needs of Arizona's workforce?
Our programs are very much selected to be things that tie directly into local workforce needs. We are a place where students, and we operate at the high school level, so we have 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders who can cut their teeth in a field, really understand, I like machines, I like engines, is automotive for me, is more of machining for me, is construction for me. Or is it not for me, and the way to take that forward is in a CAD program or some other sort of an engineering program. This is a space where young people can figure out and sort of try their hand at things and then figure out what is the pathway that goes forward to that, either into the post-secondary space through the community colleges or the university system, or directly to work. All of our programs are built to provide people with certifications that are credentials that have value in industry. And talking about the affordability piece, one of the benefits of that is it's a foot in the door for people to get an entry-level position somewhere that they will then pay for the next steps that they need. Because it is at the high school level, it's programs that very much are your first step down a path. And there needs to be further training in post-secondary spaces. But we help sort of equip people to understand what those opportunities are.
Susan, where do community colleges fit in there with CTE and what community colleges are providing for workforce development in particular?
Very much fit together. And again, coordination is key to that, but we then can take the next step where we actually have fast track certification programs that are piloted and owned by employers. So you literally walk from the classroom at the end of 6 or 8 or 10 weeks the next day into a job. And that is, I think, an evolving way of making sure you have affordable opportunities that have guaranteed results. So we do work very much in companionship with at least the GTEDs in Maricopa County. Can we do, again, more communication to our participants, to our students, to parents that these are opportunities? That's what I'm hoping is happening today.
Okay. Jen, let's get you in the conversation. I think people hear student regent, I would think many people observing or watching or listening are thinking, not really sure what that is. So please give us a description. How did you get in that role and what is it that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in middle school as a part of student government. And once I entered school at Northern Arizona University, an opportunity came to me to apply to be student regent, which is basically a student representative on the governing board for ASU, NAU, and U of A. And so on that board, now that I'm in my second year, I'm a voting member. I get to have just as much of a say as any of the other regents on the board. And I get to help shape the way that our public university system looks in Arizona.
So based on the early questions we've talked about, opportunities, whether it's affordability or something else, what rings true for you as someone who's gone through that experience fairly recently?
I think that a big barrier with students is affordability, as we've been talking about, as well as like mental health and just these students coming out of high school and not really being sure of where to go. And I think it's amazing how in Arizona we have all of these options. We have CTE programs that allow them to discover what their passions may be. There's community colleges who allow them to kind of get like a taste for what is out there. And so a lot of the work that I've been able to do on the board this year is surrounding mental health and well-being, which is a big, big driver of keeping students in college and not dropping out. So I've been able to go around the different schools and conduct these listening sessions, hearing from students and using this to actually inform change. And it's caught some like national attention. So it's been really wonderful to see how that impact goes into play.
Rich, you want to jump in on that?
No, it's super important what's going on there. The Board of Regents really has taken a leadership position on how we further access, especially in working with some groups that maybe traditionally we haven't thought about. So I think that work's to be commended, along with the work of everybody here.
I'm going to stick with you to talk more about accessibility overall, because yes, we're going to talk about affordability, I promise. I'm not just teasing that. But as far as accessibility overall, Maricopa County dominates the state, but we have a lot of people who live in other areas of the state, rural, in some cases tribal, low income. How has the state been doing as far as accessibility? How can an organization like yours help accessibility grow?
I think when you think about accessibility, what we're really focused on are including more people into this really crucial pipeline between education, moving into workforce that are from Arizona. It's not sustainable for us to keep flying people in from all over the world or all over the United States to fill these great jobs we have, right? So that's kind of the core of really what we're doing and why we're doing this. Number one, we need to make sure that students across the state, regardless of where they're from, and some of these places you're really pointing towards, some of the what we're seeing as challenges is getting the right information at the right time. A lot of that because sometimes we don't have the professionals in place. And one of the things that Arizona faces as a challenge, and has been for some time, is that our academic counselors and our college and career counselors are few and far between. Arizona today does have the highest ratio of students to every counselor in the country. And it's not by a little, it's by a lot. And so that's one of the things that we're constantly seeing is when is the right time to get that information? And then when it is, how do you help families better understand their options? A lot of tools are coming out for that right now that are really good. And then, of course, how do we talk to them about the perception of affordability as an access piece versus what they can really expect. And then finally, because Arizona does not have historically a strong financial aid system targeted to low-income communities and low-income families, we're super reliant on federal funding like Pell Grants and student loans, all that comes through completing the FAFSA, which is its own animal, right? So, and we're all trying to be helpful. And when I say we here, the collective we in the community, really trying to be helpful around getting those students on track to complete the right paperwork to give them that hope and direction that they can attend. And so that's a lot of what makes up the access puzzle, is information and resources.
Meryl, you wanted to get in on this?
I did. The access question, I think, is really critical. One of the things that I know you've talked about it in some of your other panels earlier today. When you look at how many students go to post-secondary, complete post-secondary, if we're trying to increase the output on the other side of that for industry, for our economy, for our community, the biggest intervention points are before they ever get onto a college campus. And by college, I mean anything post-secondary. I mean trade school, I mean community college, I mean university, whatever. And that's one of the spaces that career and tech ed plays a big role, because we do have CTE classrooms in high schools in every public school district across the state. We have access for students who are homeschooled or private schooled or at charter schools, et cetera. There are a lot of ways that you can bring young people and their parents together to start thinking, okay, I like health care. What does that mean? What could that look like? And be in a classroom where they can put their hands on tools, do real activities, have that mindset to think forward. And it's our job as the district to bring in guest speakers and connect with industry and help lay out those pipelines and those pathways. I think across the board, when you ask people what jobs are available out there, your average 10th grader doesn't really know, and neither do their parents, and neither do I, and I stand in this space.
Susan, that really strikes me, because I think a lot of people some of us who are in certain circles think, oh, well, why do you need to get the information out there? What are you talking about? And yet there are so many people with so many other things going on in their lives. How does the community college district raise the information and say, there are so many opportunities out here, don't miss out?
It's a very complicated network. We heard about choices even in elementary education. How do you figure out where you want that student to go? It gets much more complicated as you get further up in the process. And part of the challenge we have is not having that information out there. It's also things keep changing. Rich mentioned the changing nature of federal funding, and obviously many of the programs that we offer, particularly those that are segmented to certain industries, are funded with federal grants that may or may not be continuing. So part of what we hope to do is to continue to try to reach out to the corporate world for two reasons. One, to help us educate their employees, their communication links, and two, to be more participatory in what they do for funding, because it won't be sustainable unless we have some other dollars, which at the end of the day will actually support the economy.
Yeah. So Jaden, again, I'm going to come to you as the young person on our panel, even though you were in student government in 8th grade. Is this something that you were finding out? Did your parents know what was going on? Did your friends know what was going on? Did they know that there were other opportunities? You didn't necessarily have to take the traditional university path. You could go to a JTED, you could go to a CTE, you could go to a community college. Was all that information available to you?
Generally, but it definitely is. I feel like there's so much information out there that it's really easy to get kind of clouded and not be able to kind of see what is like actually going on without talking to real people. So I was fortunate to go to a high school that had CTE programs, and I've seen tons of my friends and colleagues be able to kind of pick up that path and get an idea for what they want to do in their future and get some of those questions answered.
Susan, I need to come to you on dual enrollment. First of all, explain to folks what that is and how it helps high school students get ready for the next step.
It's a great program, and it's applicable across the board, whether someone wants to go to a four-year institution, to an ASU or a community college, or a CTE, because it allows you to be, as a high school student, to enroll in a class that also provides accreditation for that next step into post-secondary education. It makes things far more affordable, and there's options for those students too. They can maybe graduate quicker in a 2-year or 4-year process, or it allows them to do more things in that 4-year time frame if they will have taken all of their core curriculum courses, both in a dual enrollment program and then ultimately in those first couple of years, and then they get a chance to explore new and different opportunities. It's a very simple way to get information. start going to websites for the institutions, and quite frankly, initiate that conversation with your counselor.
Did you do that, Jen?
Yeah, there's actually a resource called College Ready AZ, and it's a whole website. It's a landing page for students, for families to be able to really make sense of all of this information and like plan out how they want to tackle their career after high school.
Rich, what are your thoughts on dual enrollment?
I'll tell you the voters' thoughts on it first. I mean, we think sometimes we don't agree on much in the state. Well over 80% of Arizona voters agree that the state should be more active in helping to encourage and fund and invest in dual enrollment. We can't get 80% of the people in Arizona to agree the sky is blue on any given day, so it's meaningful in that way. We also know it's part of the affordability question, so we're certainly for that, and it gives people confidence they can do that level of work. So like ABOR, we have created a tool called Guide for Your Future, a website that really at any point from middle school on lets you know where you should be, what things you should be doing to get on that track. And we've also recently transcreated that into Spanish to make sure it has the right feel for, especially the parents of a lot of the students that we help around the state.
Are there limits to dual enrollment? Who can apply for it? What schools are taking part?
I think one of the improvements that could be made in dual enrollment is that we really standardize that across Arizona, that opportunity, because of the relationships and partnerships around dual enrollment. A lot of times a community college or university in a region working with high schools in the region or JTED, CTEDs, we find some inconsistencies about how much it costs, things of that nature, and that's certainly a barrier to high school students if there is some type of cost involved. We also see that we don't have enough teachers or actually qualified to teach those dual enrollment classes. There's some very specific requirements that we really need to get a hold of and probably improve in some way to make sure that we're able to provide more access to this great, I think, widely agreed upon great program.
Marilyn, I want you to weigh in. Does Pima JTED work with local
Dual
schools?
enrollment, absolutely.
Okay,
we have a strong relationship with both the University of Arizona and Pima Community College, which is our local community college. We offer dual enrollment programs, so for some of our programs, like we have a really robust cybersecurity program on our campus, and our students get credit at the Pima Community College for that. We have a similar relationship in the engineering program with the University of Arizona. We also offer some concurrent enrollment, which if you're tuning in from home, Pima Community College, if you haven't been there, has the most beautiful automotive center you've ever seen. It's really spectacular. So we're not going to build our own. We're going to say, can we use that? And we send students there. And so they are doing a JTED program, but they are going to the campus to participate on it. And there's a number of programs like that that work. One of the other things that we talk about in the, I wouldn't say dual enrollment space exactly, but one of the things, and listen, JTED is fantastic. We're great. But CTE as a model nationally is just a very effective model. Students will graduate high school at up to 20 percentage points higher than their peers just by participating in career and tech ed. And that's not magic. It's because they go to school, they are doing hands-on work, they're thinking about their future, they have this vision of what it ties to. And if they love their drone class and they have to sit through algebra to get there, then they'll sit through algebra and then they graduate, right? And so there is a lot of impact of participating in career and tech ed. And all the data also shows that they tend to be more ready for what comes next. They perform better in college and at work, all this stuff, right? So one of the things that we try and focus on, as well as our dual enrollment opportunities, is just the regular enrollment opportunities. Okay. Getting students who maybe they aren't ready to be in a dual enrollment class today, how do we get them to the point where they are ready absolutely to finish with us and walk across to Pima's campus or to the mall down at the U of A and be successful there? And so I think there's a really important piece there as well when you talk about prepping people and getting them into that, successfully making it through the pipeline to where they have family supporting jobs and strong careers and are a thriving member of the community.
Rich mentioned one of the ongoing challenges with dual enrollment is that those programs are different in different counties. So for example, in Yuma County, a dual enrollment program is free to a student because there is state funding coming to Yuma County for that program. In Maricopa, that's not the case. There is no state funding coming to Maricopa community colleges. So we have a different arrangement, all which still is a great, much more affordable way of doing it than starting in the more traditional fashion. That's the kind of work we still need to do. We still have to figure out how we can communicate those differences to parents and students and why it is different and how to make it better, and to deal with the lack of certified teachers that can teach those courses, then apply for the accreditation that gets them to that place.
Okay, we've waited a little bit of time. We've sort of touched on it. Rich, elephant in the room is affordability. Arizona's not alone when it comes to that, I wouldn't think, although we're focused on what's going on in Arizona. What are the biggest challenges of countering that lack of affordability? Have things gotten any better? Have they actually gotten more challenging?
So let me start by saying Education for Arizona looks at this constantly. And one thing we do know from the data that's out there, we're not making this up, is that Arizona institutions, by national standards, are not unaffordable. Okay? We fall right where we should. Our community colleges are very affordable. Our public universities are right in the middle of the pack, doing a great job at containing cost. So there's a couple of solutions, I think, here that we need to look at. One, students need to have a much better understanding of what their real cost is. If you ask somebody at the universities, they will tell you if a student wants to come here and they make X, we can make it happen, right? I think what we've gotten into, though, is that's a hard message to market. And what ends up happening is a student usually doesn't really know what their situation is going to be, regardless of what kind of education and training after high school they want to get, until they go and talk to somebody there. By that time, a lot of those folks have self-selected out of the process, right? So there is this affordability issue and also a perception of affordability issue that we're really dealing with. The other thing is we have to really get serious about investing in post-secondary education at the student level in our state. We're one of the only states in the country that does not have a robust financial aid system that's really targeted to help those most in need attend our colleges and universities. So we're overly, almost totally reliant upon federal funding to bridge that gap.
Susan, you've been in public policy in the state for a long time. Is what Rich is saying is true? And if so, how do we get more of that robust supply?
Well, I do want to just add on to his positive message because 93% of our students coming out of the Community College District in Maricopa leave with no debt. And I think that's a fabulous figure. Of the 7% that are leaving with debt, it's relatively small. Admittedly, that's because the overhead cost is lower. So it is an ongoing message, despite what I just told you, that we still need more engagement, I think, by the state in making up some of these differences, understanding the return on that investment is high. Because if you look at that, and Rich, your data supports this too, there is a high return on folks who are coming out of our programs into jobs that then generate taxes, then become solid citizens. I mean, it's a cycle that we need to continue to perpetuate. And it's all about messaging and getting those messages to voters and parents and students. So,
Marilyn, I want to take our viewers and listeners behind the curtain a little bit, because as we were sitting in the green room enjoying fantastic cups of water and other things, we talked a little bit about you coming from Georgia and that Georgia has something that was set up by a previous governor. Without getting us too caught up in Georgia issues, can you give us an idea of what they did and whether you think that would be viable in Arizona?
Sure. Georgia has developed over the course of, I think, the last 15 years, a really robust conversation around education and specifically targeting early literacy. Okay. And I know you spoke about it earlier in some of the other panels, but that early literacy piece is really quite critical for equipping students with the tools that they need to even have a chance to succeed further down the line. And I moved here from Georgia. My example for this is that I live in Tucson and I tried to dig a hole in my yard and I didn't have a jackhammer. And so it didn't get me very far. I didn't have the right tool for the job. Turns out you need a jackhammer. If you don't have basic literacy, you are going to do bad in your math class, even if you're a math kid, right? Because you don't understand the word problems. You're going to do bad and further along. So there was a widespread effort, a really robust statewide effort to articulate that conversation across the state from an economic development perspective, the understanding that this isn't just effective to a cute 8-year-old. This is your future workforce. This is your workforce pipeline. And these are the levers you can pull because it's your workforce pipeline to really affect outcomes down the road. And if you are closing your doors in 5 years or 10 years, then you don't care. If your goal is to put yourself out of business, let it go. But if you want to thrive, then there are some upstream interventions that really need to be put in place. And I think that that is a really critical conversation to be having everywhere in the nation, but certainly, we see it here in Arizona around how do we pull together. This is an education system. We operate, like I said, at the high school level, but every student who comes to us comes from somewhere. I am invested in the success of early childhood, of our K-12 system, of 3rd grade literacy, 8th grade math, all of these major milestones. And I am invested in the success of the opportunities that are past us, because we're not successful until we see where our students land 5 or 10 years later. Right. And so building that as an ecosystem.
Susan, you first, then Rich, please.
Well, moving on that is we have a good opportunity here with our business community too. The Arizona Commerce Authority, a number of municipalities have really become great partners with the community college system, with our other higher education institutions, in finding those matches so that we have a very specific program, but that those dollars are now coming from the end users, which would be the corporate employers. So I think there's a model there. Does it need to be enriched? Of course, but I see some of that coming here with those engagements from corporate partners that are also working with government overhead agencies to put the pieces and put us together.
Okay. Rich?
I think one of the interesting parts, we in Arizona have started talking a lot more about college promise programs. We have roughly 50 million in university-focused promise program this year. The community colleges just got their first small tranche of funding for that same type of program this year. Georgia, interestingly enough, was the first state in the country to have a promise program called the Hope Scholarship. It was lottery funded, and it's about 10 times bigger as far as funding goes than what we're investing in Arizona right now. We are growing our investment each year. It's funded in different ways, but it's a coincidence that we're talking about Georgia on some other fronts. So that is certainly a great solution. Figuring how to fund that is a challenge, of course, but the other ways we think about it, scholarships, grants, completing that FAFSA, looking for other ways to get that done. We're having success with that, but Georgia was really a pioneer there.
Jade, I want to go back to something Rich said a while ago, to sort of end on an optimistic note, if we can. Do you have confidence that we can rebuild a feeling that more Arizonans, more grade school kids, high school kids, whatever, actually feel like there are great opportunities here in the state? Because it certainly feels that way. It certainly feels like quality of life, the chance to have an opportunity or innovation is there. But when Rich was talking, it wasn't just affordability, it was a perception that maybe they couldn't quite do it. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Are we getting there a point of more confidence? And if not, what will it take?
I think we are. I think that Arizona is growing right now as well, as we've all seen. And so it's really an exciting time to be in the educational field and in the educational landscape, and to be able to encourage students that they can go further, they can go beyond what they expected. And I think that's really been fueled by the FAFSA completion rates, as Rich was mentioning as well. If a student completes the FAFSA, they are 87% more likely to go to some kind of community college or university, and they're more likely to complete school in that way.
Okay. And now we have an audience question. Molly, thanks for joining us. What's your question?
Yeah, my name is Molly Bohannon. I cover higher education for the Arizona Center for Investigative Reporting. I'm curious, Arizona employers are consistently reporting shortages in critical fields like healthcare and teaching. What more can be done to get students into post-secondary programs that align with those demands, and to ensure that they opt to stay in Arizona to work in those fields?
I think the second part of that question is especially important. Susan, can I have you start with this?
Absolutely. You're not wrong. Those are critical fields, which is why those new bachelor degrees that we've just gotten permitted are starting with education, nursing, artificial intelligence, technology, business. Those are the kinds of things where we can start to begin to funnel graduates into those workforce programs. And whether you not think business is workforce, it truly is. So I think that is the beginning of being able to funnel directly people who will stay here. As more and more people enroll in those programs and more of those bachelor's programs become available through other community colleges, I think we at least start down that path.
Rich, only a few seconds on this, but I really want to focus on how do we get graduates to stay in Arizona, even if they get a chance here?
Yeah, I think we have to, one thing we have to do is quit having two conversations about workforce and education. And I think it's widely agreed upon. That's kind of what's happening right now. Probably not intentionally, because there are a lot of good programs going on. We have our own program with the state's largest mining company here to help them pipeline people into their own jobs. But what we really need, and what we're hearing loudly, is like we can't continue to have a conversation about workforce without education people in the room. We can't have a conversation about education without workforce in the room. Until we get to that point, then we're going to continue to talk about all these great things that are going on without really having a cogent and coordinated strategy, which I think that's the opportunity, and that's the way to keep more kids here, is by letting them know where they can be when they graduate.
All of you were terrific. Thanks. I know 30 minutes went by very quickly, but let me thank Susan Bittersmith, Jaden Fisher, Meryl Kemp-Wilcox, Rich Nickel. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arizona is evolving rapidly, shaped by technology, innovation, and a shifting economy. Today's students face new challenges, gaps in digital access, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and preparing for jobs that look very different from the past. But this moment also brings opportunity. Our education system can adapt to equip students to lead in the future, and along the way, civic engagement can help build the collaboration needed for real progress. So how do we ensure Arizona students are ready for a changing world? Let's welcome our panelists. Peter Boyle from the Center for the Future of Arizona, Jamie Cassup, former Chief Education Evangelist at Google, Jessica Pacheco from the Arizona Board of Regents, and Katie Ratliff from the Common Sense Institute. Thank you all for being here. So some of these panels, you kind of build up to something. We're not going to do that with this one. So Katie, we're going to go really big. I'm going to ask it this way. What does a bold, future-ready vision of education look like for Arizona? And let's just blow people's minds.
Absolutely. The future of education in Arizona and really all over the country is customization and individualization. You are going to see programs that meet a student's unique individual needs, allow them to fulfill their full capacity and potential. In Arizona today, the data says half of students are already choosing the school that works best for them, whether that's district open enrollment, a charter school, a micro school, a private school. And the fastest growing segment of education in our state is homeschool. It was traditionally about 2%. It's recently grown to about 6%. So still small, but it's tripled in size just in the last few years. So you will continue to see schools innovate and provide that customized experience, or they will start to lose students. We have fewer and fewer K-12 aged kids in our state. And so everybody is having to fight for students and provide a more customized experience that will prepare kids for a world that we don't even know what kind of jobs are going to be available and opportunities will be available for them.
We stole one of my questions for later, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Jessica, what are your thoughts on this big, bold, what's coming next for Arizona students?
So I'd love to put this into context,
Please,
right?
Sure.
Because right now I think the world is at an inflection point. And what I mean by that is that the disruption that's coming with the next iteration of technology is unfathomable. It wasn't that long ago, and I love this, I heard it on a podcast this summer, that humanity thought the world is flat. Right? We learned that the world wasn't flat, but when we thought the world was flat, we didn't know the questions to ask. And right now, with the advent of where we are with artificial intelligence and how rapidly things are evolving and how rapidly information is changing, the world's flat for us. We don't know the questions to ask. And so what I think is that not only do we need to be customized, right? We also need to be ready for an entirely new paradigm. So to your point on collaboration and engaging with all of us, meaning all of Arizonans coming together to ensure that we have enough flexibility in our infrastructure to be able to meet that need, a need we can't define today. So it's really exciting and it's a little scary.
Jamie, you know, a Google guy, we're expecting you to have all the answers. So
Yeah.
what's your answer to this?
I wish I did. I'll take a different angle on this, which is, let's say education isn't broken. Let's say education is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is take a population, about 80%, give them basic education, and make sure that they can do basic things. We don't live in that world anymore. So it's not that education is necessarily broken, it's that the world is, like you said, dramatically changing. And so what we need to do is think about what are the best learning models that we have, and then how do we use technology to recreate what that learning should look like. And so for me, customization makes sense, personalization makes sense, but what is it that we're customizing? What is it that we're going to personalize? What I want us to focus on are human skills. The human skills that our students are going to need for the future, no matter what the technology looks like.
I really want to ask about human skills. Peter, let me give you a chance first.
Sure. So coming from the Center for the Future of Arizona, one of the things that we do is ask Arizonans what matters the most to you. And we hear loud and clear that education is one of the, if not the most important issues for Arizonans for our future. It touches every other issue. And we also hear from Arizonans that they're looking for schools to have the flexibility to meet the needs of every child. They're looking for college and career connected pathways. And I think whatever path we go down as a state in terms of education, an important thing is to do it collaboratively. So how can we bring together cross-sector solutions from K-12, from higher education, from business and industry to help adapt our system in this changing world to truly meet the needs of every student?
Well, so what are your thoughts on the how part of that then?
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've been leading on at Center for the Future of Arizona with district partners across the state is the Arizona Personalized Learning Network. Traditional education, the teacher's at the front of the classroom, students are in rows. In a personalized learning environment, forgive my mixed metaphor here, but the student becomes the co-pilot. They get to not just plot the course for their education for where they want to go, but they get to co-design that solution with a teacher and with their peers to make that happen. And we've seen huge success in terms of student engagement and early student outcome increases from schools and districts that have adopted personalized learning models.
Jessica, I'm going to lead on the title you have with the Board of Regents. So first of all, give us a quickie. I think people may have heard of the Board of Regents when an ASU football coach gets a raise or something like that. There's a lot more to it than that. So give us an idea on what it is that the Regents do, but then also how can the Regents specifically get involved in this to make sure that the university students are ready for this next step?
So the Arizona Board of Regents is the governing body over the state's 3 public universities, Northern Arizona University, ASU, and the U of A. And we are appointed by the governor and ratified by the Senate, and there are 8-year terms, and there are 9 of us, and we are staggered. And so we work with the Arizona Board of Regents team on the governance, right, on running the state universities. We are not the presidents. We need the presidents, and we need their teams doing everything that they're doing. But we have both a fiduciary and a governance responsibility over the universities. And so what we can do is ensure that the presidents and their very, I would say, adept teams have the tools they need and the flexibility they need in order to adapt quickly in this world. Like I'll take a current example where we had financial models that were heavily reliant on foreign students. There were some changes in sort of the visa structure recently, right? And so our university teams had to quickly adapt to a completely new world, if you will, right? And did a marvelous job in sort of identifying new sources of revenue and in order to ensure that they also were reaching out to those students and keeping them engaged until they could actually physically be here, to your point, right? There's the learning environment that we're operating in is changing and changing really quickly, and our customers' needs are changing. You know, so my children, my oldest is 24 and I have 2 18-year-olds, my secret shoppers at the ASU and U of A. But my children don't know a world without cell phones. They don't know a world without a smartphone. And when I graduated from college, I didn't have a cell phone, right? And my first one was a Motorola Flip. And I mean, their world and their experience with technology and also their relationship with information is completely different than mine. And so as we sit in decision-making seats, we need to ensure that the organizations that we're engaged with have the flexibility they need in order to adapt to a world, frankly, that I can't even define.
Jamie, I'm going to go to you on this one because you were former evangelist, education evangelist at Google.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's a really cool title.
Yeah, I'm in awe of you right now. So give us an idea of what that meant, and then I'll dig into another question for you.
I mean, the brief history of that, I was at Google for 15 years. I launched, if you're using a Google tool or a Chromebook, it's my fault. You can yell at me later. But I launched all the Google tools and Chromebooks into education. I left in 2020. But the title was really about, what I was really an evangelist about was education. I'm a first generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York. I grew up in poverty. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. And education was the silver bullet, right? Education is the reason I'm sitting here talking to you. And more importantly, and here's the thing that we don't think about, especially for those of you who are educators in our classrooms, is that the impact that you have on students goes on for generations and generations and generations, right? Like, I don't remember my last boss. I left Google 5 years ago. I don't remember my boss's name, but I remember my third grade teacher's name, right? That's number one. Number two is my kids, I have 3 of them. 2 of them are older, living in New York. I have one every decade. I like having one at a time. But my kids are doing well because of my education. That's the impact that's the economic impact of education, is that it goes on for generations and generations and generations. And so that's what I was an evangelist about, was the role of education. What I saw was that technology. And again, if all we do is take technology and put it on top of our current system, then all we're doing is making the old system faster and more efficient. What we need to do is ask ourselves, what are the best models? What are the best ideas? Well, who are the best thinkers in education? And then how do we take technology and bring those ideas to life? And that's what I evangelize still today. I don't have to be at Google to do that.
I want to have everyone talk about that, but I want to go back to the human skills question, because we think of a Google guy who's talking about technology, and yet you also gave us that juxtaposition of remembering your third grade teacher. So what are the human skills you're talking about, and how do human skills balance with the fact that we are going to need technology, we're going to use technology as we always have, and maybe in different ways?
Right. And this is one of the things I'm going to say that no one's going to believe, but I have the receipts for this. I have again 3 kids. The oldest today's her birthday. Happy birthday to Elaine. She's 34 today, and I've never looked at any of their report cards. I don't look at report cards. I have an 11-year-old, and I don't look at her report cards. I go in and I ask questions about her curiosity, questions about her executive management skills. I ask questions about this: can she think? Can she learn? I want my kid to be able to know. I want her to have the ability to learn, the ability to think, the ability to be in the community, the ability to tell stories, the ability to self-manage. Those are the human skills that I'm talking about. And the content only supplements those skills. So we got to reverse that. We got to go away from like, they need to know these 5 facts, to saying these are the skills they need to have, and let's use these facts to build those skills.
Well, what's also good is your kids have never had to hide their report card from them.
And you know what? And they do great.
I'd like to expound on that just a little bit, because I agree with you entirely, where we have an education system that's based on rote memorization. And we now have tools that give us information faster than our brains can work. Right? And so if we could free up that capacity, right, to be able to self-manage better, to be able to be more engaged citizens, to be able to give a speech and elicit an emotional response, we're better off as a community and a country.
Katie?
I think the challenge of this moment in education is that we have to be prepared to go fast and slow at the same time. So we have to prepare students for this world that we can't even define yet. We have to make sure that we are enabling them to learn these human skills that are going to be so important, that they have the curiosity and the intellectual capacity to ask the right questions and navigating the world. We also have to make sure they can read.
Yeah.
And Arizona has been falling further and further behind in recent years when it comes to proficiency at a 4th grade reading level, which is an indicator of whether or not you're going to be able to graduate high school at all and have these opportunities available to you. So we really have to, at the same time, take 2 steps forward and 1 step back and ensure that we're getting the basics and the fundamentals right and making sure kids are on track to eventually be able to operate in this new world where they're going to have all these new skills that they will learn in new ways that we can't even imagine today, but they need to be able to read first.
That's obviously an important point, but Peter, I want to go back to technology a little bit more and talk about how that balances out and equity.
Sure.
I mean, we know we're never 100% fair on things, but I think when it comes to the advancing technology, you want to make sure that people are not left behind, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So how do we work that out?
Sure. I want to answer this from 2 perspectives. One is I am a proud 4th generation public educator. And as we talk about these innovations, we have and should continue to start with students, because the system must be student-centered in order to ensure all of the outcomes we want, an excellent education for every child. And because we are a human capital endeavor, we need to make sure that our teachers have the support with these new technological tools like AI, to be able to use them to be more efficient and effective in their jobs too. If you are a teacher, AI can seem really, really scary. Instead of my student reading To Kill a Mockingbird, they're getting the summary from a chatbot. Well, how can I turn that around and really leverage technological tools to my advantage? And so a lot of school districts are really leaning to some great guidance that just recently came out from Arizona Institute on Education and the Economy to help them do that. To your second point around equity within our technological assets, we know from our survey data that 55% of rural Arizonans don't have high-speed broadband that they would need to be able to access a high-quality job or remote learning for students. One of the things we also know, while that needs to remain a priority for policymakers, is that in rural and remote communities, the schools are the places that do have fast internet access and broadband. And so we're supporting communities across Arizona that are in that circumstance to incubate new industries. We're working up in Chinle to advance cybersecurity pathways, which just need that quick access point. And we're doing that in communities across Arizona. And so what we're trying to do, while still keeping the eye on the ball in terms of internet access, is rethink how we can bring jobs to those communities using the tools they do have.
I think access is absolutely critical and important. But one of the things that I think we failed our students on is this idea that we thought that because they were born with technology, that they just know how to use technology. And that's a huge mistake that we've made. It's literally like saying, hey, when you were born, there were cars. You came home from the hospital with a car. Did anyone's parents at 16 say, here's a car, good luck, right? But we did that with technology, right? We say, here's a phone, here's a tablet, here's a laptop. When in reality is what we really need to focus on is teaching these kids how to utilize these tools and how to manage themselves, how to manage their technology, how to use these tools. And professional development for teachers is absolutely critical, especially with AI, because it comes at us so, why we're sitting here, 5 companies were born in AI, right? Yeah. So it's happening so fast that it's gonna, I don't know how to solve that. That's gonna be a huge problem, is how do we teach teachers how to use these tools at the pace at which these tools are coming at us? But I think it's absolutely critical. And here's a question for all of you, like, how does Wi-Fi work? How does fiber work? What's an algorithm, right?
You unplug it and you plug it back in.
Right? These are questions that our kids should know how to answer. It no longer makes that sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katie, weigh in on this one.
Well, so I just wanted to add to what Peter is saying, and Jeannie's got a great point too. And I think the important thing to focus on is we need to ensure that we have the flexibility in our school funding system to pay for these kinds of things. Right now, we have a funding system that is incredibly antiquated and has resulted in a tremendous amount of waste. We have $12 billion of real estate in district schools that's not being used. It was paid for by taxpayers, it was built by taxpayers to educate students, and it's not being used for anything. We have school buses that are at 45% capacity that are still driving around when there are innovations and better ways to move kids around. And so part of the reason that those things exist is that's how we fund schools. You know, we say we'll build you a new school and we'll never tell you when you have to close it or when you have to use those assets for other things. But we're now seeing there are a lot of needs. There are a lot of infrastructure needs, Wi-Fi, you know, high-speed internet, technology. And why are we wasting all of these resources on an old asset, which is real estate, that is not as necessary anymore and isn't being used today?
Nor do schools have the flexibility to maybe even lease it out, right?
Precisely.
To use it as another revenue stream, just because we, again, have an antiquated model.
Peter, let me get your thoughts on that. Because I'm curious, because there's certainly talk about waste and whatnot, and I think people honestly feel like there is some, but how do we balance the fact that the changing technology, money needs to be perhaps distributed in a different way? What does a model like that potentially look like?
One of the ways in which Arizona has really led on that front is through our instructional time models. So through legislation passed in 2021, we were able to become the first state in the country that actually divorced school funding from seat time. What that means is that now schools and districts can really invest in innovative models, project-based learning or work-based learning experiences, potentially tutoring opportunities, and not be worried about receiving very significant funding cuts for trying something new. And so one of the things that we're supporting schools and districts to do is leverage some of the existing policy flexibilities to really navigate a world with limited financial resources, and be able to also, at the same time, meet the needs of every student. So over half of school districts have adopted an instructional time model, and early results are showing some pretty significant successes, especially in high schools that have one to support 9th grade learning outcomes, and in schools that are moving towards career and technical academies.
Jamie, again, I'm looking at you as our futurist, which is not fair, but the Google thing keeps distracting me. So what about what Arizona, other states need to be doing to balance out the fact that advanced technology is needed, it is expensive, but there are older models that people to some degree want to maintain. So what is the combination going forward to implement more technology while not, again, blowing people's minds right away to say, I don't understand what's going on here?
Right. Well, so I think Arizona has been very effective at trying to decouple those things, right? And I think it's important, like even in higher ed, can you really tell me that it takes 120 hours to get a psychology degree and 120 hours to get a computer science degree, and those are the same, right? So we have to decouple those things across the board. What we should do is focus on outcomes. What are the outcomes that we're looking for? What is it that we want to do? And the reality is that we still talk about graduations. What is graduation? Graduation from what? Right? Like, when do we stop graduating? I love to get rid of that model and start thinking about lifelong learning, because lifelong learning is really what it's about. The idea that you go to college for 4 years and then you're done, I remember that. I remember being in a computer lab, working on my last paper in graduate school, sending my paper to my dot matrix printer, that's how old I am, and sitting there going, I'm done. I never have to learn anything again. That wasn't true 30 years ago. And it's not true today. And so how do we create models where we stop talking about graduation and start talking about lifelong learning and continuous learning, so nothing's ever done, that we're constantly learning?
Jessica?
Well, and this is where Katie's comments around personalization and really sort of modular education comes in, right? And so I should be able to go to any university, and our universities are actually putting this flexibility in place and have it in place, and learn coding if I want to learn coding. And then I should be able to take a psychology class if I want to, and I should, and I should get the appropriate societal recognition that I had that skill, because that's really what a degree is, right? Society recognizes that you have a certain skill set, and so you are ready to go out and do stuff for society. And so we need to, again, and we're in the process of shifting that, but we need the business community's help, right? And we need all of your help. We need to be able to say, hey, we need different types of recognition in Arizona in order to capture job experience, in order to capture tutoring, and and the fact that I took a coding class and I know what it means now, which I really don't, but I throw it around like I do.
Well, I say this as someone who has an English degree, and my parents still don't know what that skill was. So I guess that means doing panels like this, which I'm proud to do. Katie, let me ask you about this. So we've talked about jobs that don't exist yet. So let me phrase it this way. What skills should Arizona students be learning today? And it could start as young as 3rd, 4th grade, or move into high school, move into colleges. Again, when we don't really know what the jobs may be, especially if they're, I'm going to use graduation, Jamie, sorry, but if they're still 10 years away from graduation, how do we know to what extent, what skills they're even going to need to know? How does that affect education at the younger level and even moving forward?
We know the fundamentals aren't going to change. They need to be able to read proficiently on grade level, on time, to be able to move throughout our system and continue to learn and to get that lifelong learning, that love of lifelong learning that is created when you can read and you can start to learn things and pick up on what's going on around you. And then they need human skills, like Jamie was saying. They need to know how to ask the right questions, how to be curious, how to navigate a changing world, how to learn new skills constantly, and recognize that, yes, they're never done learning because the world is going to keep changing.
Katie and I were talking earlier, and we've forgotten that learning is fun, right? And in maybe our traditional structure, we made it not fun for kids, right? But learning is really cool and can be a lot of fun. And we would love to kind of work with all of you to infuse that back into the conversation, right? Kids should be excited to read and to learn. I mean, I remember the first novel I read, it was magic, right? It took me to a whole nother world. And so it's like, we need to, not only we need to not forget that, but we need to make sure that our kids know that.
Peter, what about balancing this idea of the joy of learning, where you actually, wow, I learned something so exciting, I can't wait to tell somebody else, with the idea that we do have certain measurements, of course, that may in fact affect employment in the future?
Let's think about the measurements that really should affect employment in the future. A lot of those are credentials or certificates that have labor market value. A lot of those can be demonstrated in different competencies, right? Like maybe me giving a presentation on a topic because I'm more comfortable with that, a topic of choice, maybe that's the way I demonstrate how I know something and somebody else can write a paper. We do have a law that allows for competency-based education, which is what that model is called, on the books here in Arizona. It hasn't yet been activated. And so those are some of the things that we know there's an appetite for from this conversation today and from when all of us talk to students and parents. They want those different ways to demonstrate what they know. They want to choose their own book that they're reading for the first time. And so how can we give voice and choice to students and families in their education, help them ensure that they're driving it together, and also support our teachers who can't be just left along the wayside and doing what is a really, really hard job to meet the needs of every student.
So, Peter, you mean not everybody should read The Grapes of Wrath?
Believe it or not.
What?
Yeah. I think we probably read very different books in high school, and we turned out okay.
Okay, yeah.
Jim,
go ahead. So I want to push back on this idea that learning is fun, because clearly you don't golf, because learning is also frustrating, and and there's friction, right? And learning happens that way too. And so I think that we need to also recognize and reward when kids struggle, when they get to something. And I think oftentimes what I see with kids is that they don't want to get a bad grade, and that's the problem with grades, or they don't want to look bad, or they don't want to fail. The word failure doesn't exist anymore. There's no such word as failure. If you fail, then there's an opposite word, which is success. And we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world of constant and consistent iteration. And I think we need to teach our kids how to do that, how to iterate, how to do something, learn, get frustrated, deal with the friction, and then move on to, and that's where the joy comes in.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know you wanted to distract us with the golf thing, but I want to ask you just to put two of your kids on the spot.
Yeah.
Have you talked to the 34-year-old and the 11-year-old to see if they have a different love of learning? Have they learned in different ways? And have they learned in different ways based on what is inside of them as opposed to what's external?
Yeah, it all comes, I think that's a great question, because, I used to have this joke because I have a 33-year-old, a 24-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And a couple years ago, my oldest wanted a Polaroid camera, and my middle kid's like, what's a Polaroid camera? And my little kid's like, what's a camera? Right? Like that's how fast technology is coming at us, right? And so I think at the core of all of it, what I try to teach my kids is that they should focus on purpose, right? And I think the same three things motivate all human beings. It's the same, no matter where you are in the world. It's three things: purpose, autonomy, mastery. And we've been talking about this, right? What's your purpose, right? What problem do you want to solve? Which is a question I ask kids all the time. Second is autonomy. How do you want to solve it? What book do you want to read? And then mastery. What are the skills, the knowledge, the abilities that you need to build to solve that problem that you're passionate about? If we can focus on that, then I think we can really create a good education system.
Okay, so how does the art of teaching fit into that? So Katie, let me start with you. The idea of what teachers are being taught themselves now as they prepare to enter the classroom, and how does that evolve as we look to the future? How should it evolve?
Yeah, I think it absolutely needs to change. The first thing I think needs to change in education is we think of teaching as something that you're going to start doing when you're 22 and until you retire. And I don't know about anyone on this stage, but I don't think anybody assumes that we're going to be in the same jobs 5 or 10 years from now, and especially young people. They want to go in and they want to start their career somewhere, and then they want to go try other things, especially as the world is changing as rapidly as it is. So I do think we all need to shift our thinking about what an educator looks like. It may not be a lifelong career anymore, and that's okay. I think we've been hyper-focused on educator retention, and we want educators to feel good about their jobs and be excited about their jobs, but it's okay if they want to go on and do other things too. And I think we need to train teachers how to use technology as a tool, but not as a substitute for one-on-one teaching. I think that's why you saw so much learning loss during the pandemic, was we thought we could just substitute technology for that one-on-one relationship that students have with an educator, and you can't. It can definitely be a tool, it should be a tool, it's going to be a tool in all of our jobs moving forward, how we use AI and technology, but it will never be a substitute for that personal relationship. And so I think teachers need to be trained in how to really challenge students, to Jamie's point, to help them to persevere and to overcome that frustration and friction that comes with learning. But they need to be able to know how to incorporate this technology in this changing world into their classrooms without substituting it for that relationship.
Peter, I want to give you a minute to respond to that.
Sure. The pandemic really showed what the research has told us all along, which is that learning is social and it is relational. It is that for our students and it is that for our educators. And so we're lucky here in Arizona at Arizona State University is really leading on reimagining strategic staffing models in schools. Through their Next Education Workforce program, they're noting that one teacher, one classroom, 30 kids is no longer really working out. And so they're completely reimagining what it looks like to engage community educators and teams of distributed expertise working together to support different student needs. I think that's a model that we've seen when it's done well and when it's scaled can work really well to support student outcomes.
Now it's time for an audience question. Isabella, thanks for being here. What's your question?
Thank you all so much, first of all, for such an engaging conversation. As you said, I'm Isabella Lisco. I'm an education solutions reporter with 13 News in Southern Arizona. And I'm wondering, how can we measure whether Arizona is really setting students up for the future, but in a way that goes beyond test data, report cards, maybe goes back to that human skills conversation, because, with report cards in mind, maybe they don't paint the full picture.
Jessica, what do you think?
I don't think we can. And I think the idea of wanting to measure it and have metrics around it makes us feel safer about the unknown that's going to be happening in all of these spaces, right? And that the world is changing at a pace that we don't know what to measure because we don't know the questions to ask right now. But what I think we can do is we can ensure that we not only have a system for lifelong learning that we've talked about, right? We're not only teaching kids to get frustrated and then to have the joy of actually acquiring the skill, but that we're also talking to our job centers and really having close collaboration there with what they're seeing and what they need, right? And quite frankly, using Peter's data. Like the data they have is amazing, and it helps us understand trends, right? And then, the research that Katie's organization does is really profound in how we can look at budgets better and differently, right? To use the resources, the limited resources we have in order to really in order to meet tomorrow's needs, right? And the Google guy is just funny.
Yeah, well, we're going to give Jamie the last word on this. Jamie?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I think there's this underlining tone that some of us feel, maybe you will feel at some point, which is, how do we define success as humans? How do we define success as people? How do we define success as students? And I think for years and years, it's been, how big your house is, what neighborhood you live in, how much money you make, your stat. We still do it, right? Like there's no podcast that are every podcast that talks about success, they're not bringing common people up. They're always people who are successful or powerful or have status. But there's this underlining tone of that's not real success. Success is happiness. Success is finding purpose and meaning in life. And I think that's what we'll start seeing. And I'm partnering with Tempe Elementary School District, and we're building a new school. And the word school is loaded because we don't know what it's going to be. But it's going to be a place where students can come and identify what their purpose is, what their passions are, what their pathways are, what possibilities exist. And so the last thing I'll say about this when it comes to this whole idea is that there's this overtone around, AI is coming to take our jobs, right? Hey, how about we flip that and say, hey, guess what? AI is coming to take our jobs. Isn't that awesome? Right? Like now that AI is coming to take our jobs, maybe we can focus on what we're passionate about, what we care about, what we really want to do. Because I don't know any kid who's like, I want to go spend the rest of my life sitting in a cubicle looking at Excel spreadsheets, right? So that is, I think, how we should be measuring success is, do our kids have meaning? Do they have purpose? Do they have passion? That's what I hope we measure.
Amazing panel. You guys did not underdeliver. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Peter Boyle, Jamie Cassip, Jessica Pacheco, Katie Ratliff, thank you all for being here. And thank you all for joining us as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to all our panelists, our audience, and to all of you at home. Education shapes not just individual lives, but the future of Arizona itself.
And we hope this is just the start of a community movement to more deeply invest in the future of Arizona education. And we know that's a mission our partners at Clean Elections share, including their voter education director, Gina Roberts, who is here with us. Thank you, Gina.
This has been wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a really great, insightful discussion today. And at Clean Elections, we hope events like these inspire viewers to stay involved, whether it's education or another topic of interest. The key is staying connected, because when communities engage, Arizona succeeds. Your opinion on these issues matters. That's why it's important to vote in every single election, including those local elections. And Clean Elections is honored to continuously provide voter education on the issues that matter to Arizonans.
Very well said, Gina. Thank you so much for all of this. We hope this dialogue inspires everyone watching to stay engaged. Together, we can build a stronger Arizona. Thank you for joining Inside the Issues, Education Solutions for Arizona.